Welcome to the Big Kids Book Club. A podcast about all things fictional from middle grade to young adult. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Big Kids Book Club. My name is Marcus, I am your host, and with me today I've got two of my favourite friends to talk about all lots of bookish material and some glorious sunny summer reads. We've picked the perfect day, I don't know about you. With me I have Rab. Do you want to introduce yourself, Rab?
Hi, I'm Rab. I'm an author of sort of young adult and middle grade writing.
And let's not forget, we also have Emma here with us. Emma, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thanks, Marcus. How are you?
Not too bad, like I said. I mean, today's topic is all about summer reads, and I'm staring out the window at the moment, and it is a glorious day here in the Midlands. I don't know how it's going for Rab. You up in the northeast?
We've got beautiful sun, actually, which is it's a little bit rare up here, but beautiful sun, a little bit of wind.
And Emma down south?
Yeah, it's super bright. A little bit overcast, but it is boiling.
I was going to say, very un-English day, but it seems very poignant, and I love it.
Indeed.
So we are going to be talking about summer reads, but we're going to trial something new today. So this is our first sort of group podcast. So new format. So anyone who listened to some of the previous formats before, this is something we're doing completely different. See if it takes off. But we've also got some other big news, not just this new format. Rab, I believe you've had some awesome bookish news recently. I don't know if you want to fill us in.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention?
I have, so my novel, The Landfill Mountains, which is a young adult fantasy, has been picked up by Onway Press. So that's going to be coming out next year, October 12th, 2021. So that's been some very good news for me amidst all this lockdown and stuff. So very much looking forward to that.
Very exciting. Did that sort of just sort of come out of the blue, or have you been like burning away over this sort of lockdown period to get that in?
Yeah, so it's something I've known about for about a month and not been able to share because we wanted to make it a big announcement. So I've been keeping it to myself. So I'm very glad to sort of tell the world at this point. So that's really exciting.
Yeah, or the butterflies in your stomach where you're like, oh, I want to tell someone, but I can't.
There's something a little bit nice in knowing something that nobody else knows, even if it's just something about yourself. There's a secret feeling of importance of having some kind of secret.
Well, absolutely. I think, I don't know about you, Emma, but I think there's two customers already waiting for next October to see how that comes out.
Oh, 100%. Sign me up.
Yeah, so we are very, very proud of Rab, and we've got all the podcast ads, stock clap sounds in the background. Very excited for that. So congrats, Rab. That's pretty awesome. So with all the awesome news out the way, and with the sunshine still glaring, we shall move on to the next part of our show. Okay, so we come on to the main part of the show, the main sort of topic, if you were. And as it is such a beautiful day, and we are in the middle, it's August. How is it August already? Is it me, or is it just a bit weird? The year's going pretty quick.
Oh, it's literally like we went into lockdown in March and then it happened, but it didn't happen. And now it's August. It's very confusing.
Oh, absolutely. And so with August being normally the month that we would maybe get away to the beach and enjoy a holiday, what better way than to escape instead to a beach in another world somewhere, perhaps through the magic of books. So today we're looking at summer reads, but there is already a sort of mysticism around books on the beach. You know how the idea that you always have these holiday reads that come out every year. So one thing we're going to do before we start talking about some of the stuff we've been reading is what really makes a summer read, you know? What is it about summer that makes us want to pick up a book? What about you, Rab? What makes you want to pick up a book in summer?
I think there's something in it being kind of a bit more of a light read. The idea of you sitting reading something in a garden or on a beach, I feel like in summer you want to read something where it's kind of relaxed. You're being taken along by the story, but you're not being almost too worried by it. It's I sort of think of it as the opposite of a winter read. I imagine a winter read would be sort of a dark and foreboding read, whereas in terms of summer, something a bit more light.
So less grimdark fantasy over the summer months then?
I've always got time for grimdark fantasy, but certainly less in summer.
So maybe more sort of a chirpy, upbeat, middle grimdark, or slightly grimdark. Diet grimdark. There you go. New marketing
Nailed
campaign.
it. Absolutely
Grimdark
nailed it.
fantasy.
But what for you, Emma? What makes you gravitate towards a book in the summer?
I think it's usually this kind of demographic of young adults. That's kind of traditionally when they have the time off, so they've got a chance to read the things that they want to read rather than what they have to read at school. For me, I always found it was something that, again, kind of like Rab was saying, not too heavy kind of plot wise, so you didn't have to read it kind of day in, day out to keep up with the story, but enough kind of twists and turns and excitement that's going to bring you back to it. But yeah, not something that you're kind of having to work for, if that makes sense.
Something that's just going to be a nice distraction. Like say, if you're on the beach, you're just zoning out, as it were. So you want something that's going to maybe sort of take you off on a story, but not so much that as you're sort of zoned out a little bit, that you're not going to be worried too much. I think it's almost like a Netflix. You put it on in the background. But in a book form. Does that make sense?
100%. I was just, as soon as he said Netflix, I was like, oh well, it's kind of like a summer fling, but with a book.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of there for then, but then you move on.
Now, you mentioned summer flings then, and there is a sort of tendency that books, especially summer reads, have a little bit more of a sort of like romance element to them. So is there any, is it sort of something that maybe during the summer you'd be more keen? Because I know I'm not a big like romance reader, but I must admit, I don't mind going a bit gooey in the summer for a cutesy romance. I mean, Rab, but you've just mentioned grimdark there. Would you maybe try a different genre in the summer?
Yeah, no, I must admit, I do like a summer romance. I think there's something in romances, you've often got a couple of characters that throughout you're just rooting for them to get together, and the satisfaction of that ending where they do get together, which I think it would be in a summery book. In a wintry book, it's when at the end they're desolate and separate. That's a different sort of book. But in a summer romance, you get that happy ending, and there's something like a sunny day about that.
I mean, well, it is the summer, so what better time to walk off into the sunset? I mean, it's built for it, really.
There's something in that as well around the setting. I think I imagine a summary book as a book that is set somewhere very warm. Like in summer, you want to be reading about people in California or people in Italy or people in Greece during summer. You want to stay in that feeling of sunshine. You don't want to be bringing your brain somewhere cold when you're just enjoying the heat.
So no polar fantasies then, trying to, any Arctic expeditions?
I'm going to throw a little bit of a spanner in the works here.
Ooh,
and I think, yeah, I love a good spanner. When we say summery books, are we talking about books that are set in the summer, or are we talking about books that we read in summer, and are they different things?
I'm getting really in depth now. See, this is the podcast you're after. We hit the real crux of the meaning here. I like the idea of that. For I think other people, it's going to mean both things. Some people will be like, summary read is set in summer. I think some people are just going to be wanting a book that is in the mind or the mindset or the mood of summer. So that's actually a great point, Emma. So do you sit on either side of that fence?
Yeah, I think that I'd say so. Coming from having done an English literature degree at university, there was obviously a lot of reading that I had to do that was rather dense and rather heavy. So kind of across summer, and then coming where I come from, which is Bermuda, obviously that's a very summery setting. So in some ways, myself being in the summer setting already, I didn't necessarily need a book to get me there. But I just wanted something a bit lighter, like Rab was saying, apart from my university read. But then, you do have certain books that are kind of set, talking about like Daisy Dukes and short shorts in California. And it's almost impossible not to want to read about that, because who would not want to be there? So yeah, I'd say I'm pretty on the fence with it.
Yeah, so I think that's a good point. Rab, do you sit on either side of the fence, or are you sticking to your guns there with your mindset?
I think I'm quite open to it, really. I was trying to think back over what I've read in summers past to try and think of what's sort of my quintessential summer book. And one that really sticks with me was I was 18 and me and a couple of friends went to Greece. And I read The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman, sitting on a beach. And that's somewhere between middle grade and young adult, I think. And that book it's the opposite of a summary setting. It's set in very kind of gothic and dark places. And yet something about being on that beach and then having my mind transported elsewhere, the balance of the two was very nice. I might be disagreeing with myself a little bit there. But yeah, I think if I had to look back and pick the one book that I think of as most a summer book, it's probably The Graveyard Book for me, which even in its title isn't massively summery, is it?
No, not really. But I guess it did what it needs to do, which was it did transport you. And I think that is the real crux of what a summer read will do. I mean, books in general, that's the idea. You can transport yourself to anywhere in this world or another world and pick yourself up. But I feel like we are getting sort of almost there with, what it means to us. And I can actually see that each of us has a slightly different interpretation, which I guess books in general have all, I mean, that's just books. Ask 5 people in a room about a book and they'll all have a different opinion.
I think that's kind of the beauty of it, though, because, again, there's that whole discussion about author's intent versus reader's perception, but that's why you can keep rereading books, and that's why books can be read by so many different demographics, because it's going to mean something different to everyone depending on you.
What I've noticed here as well is that I've completely, in the books that I've picked for our next section, I've completely broke my own rules. So any of the suggestions I've made of what makes a summary read, you'll notice I break entirely when I describe the books that I've picked.
Hey, you know what? Another thing about summer is, again, it's that freedom. I think it goes back to being in school, which means there's no rules in summer.
There we go.
No rules in summer. So, school is the sort of like, especially when you're a younger reader, school is the authority. So summer is always about no school, meaning no rules and freedom and beautiful sunny days to do whatever it is you want. So yeah. So basically that is how we've managed to spend the last sort of 15 minutes working out, is that what makes a summary read? Anything can, because there's no rules. So yeah, deal with it.
Love it.
But that being said, Rab, you made a nice little segue there about our next section. So the next section, we are going to look at a couple of books we've been reading this summer and some other ones that we want to finish off by the end of the summer as part of what we've been discussing there about what makes a summary read. So as you mentioned them, I think that's a great time that we shall move on with the show. Okay, so moving on with the show, as we mentioned, we're going to talk about some of our bookish reads this summer. So, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, let's start with Emma. Yo! Emma, what have you been reading so far this summer?
I've actually been reading a few things this summer, but one of them is actually a reread, and I just had to pick it up again because it popped out at me on a summer day, quite like this one. And it's Warm Bodies by Isaac Marion. I don't know if either of you two have heard of it.
I have, but that's because thanks to you, maybe a couple of years ago, you encouraged me to read it. So I know that one.
There it is.
For everyone who hasn't, do you want to give us a quick breakdown, a quick summary about what it's about?
Yeah, of course. So essentially the easiest way to explain it is that it's a retelling of Romeo and Juliet, but Romeo and the Montagues are all zombies and Juliet and the Capulets are all humans. So there's an obvious divide there. And it, as we had mentioned before, all summer books have a little bit of, or all good summer books have a little bit of romance, and there is a love story between Romeo, or R as the zombie is called, and Juliet, who is Julie in the novel. And I won't tell you the ending of how it all works out, but it is something to do with the romance. So anyone who's not read it before can have a little think on that.
Yeah, and tying that in perfectly there with the whole talk about romance. Romeo and Juliet, of course, is always one of those go-to romances. Like if you think of like great romances through history, everyone's always going to sit there and go like, Romeo and Juliet. Even though actually, if you think about it, it's not romantic at all.
Do you know what? Interestingly, I quite like Shakespeare, and Romeo and Juliet is probably one of my least favorites, just because of, it sounds bad, but just the cliche of it. I picked up this book thinking, well, not realizing that was what it was before I started reading it, and then thinking, oh my God, it's Romeo and Juliet, but as zombies, and I love it. It's like when you realize that Hamlet is the Lion King, and it all makes sense.
Yep, all those small, subtle sort of like hints and stuff. Yeah, for me, I think it's got some very good YA tropes in it. I mean, there's insta-love in there, which is a big YA trope. You've got the whole sort of like rivalries or family rivalries. They can't star-crossed lovers. They can't be together though, and blah blah blah. But this isn't a Shakespeare podcast. This is a bookish.
Oh, I want one comment on Shakespeare before Shakespeare goes away.
Oh, go on then, Rab. Yes, go on. Go on.
I think Romeo and Juliet is better seen if you look at it as a teenage tragedy rather than a romance.
That's an interesting way to put it.
Because probably if they'd lived, they'd have been a couple that would have been together for about a year and broken up, as a lot of sort of teenage couples do. But
or got pregnant.
The pure hatred between the families led to all that destruction. So if you go into it not feeling too romantic, but see it as the effects of prejudice on teenagers, then there's something different you can get from it.
Yeah, I would like to talk more Shakespeare, because I feel like some of the stories are like brilliant and beautiful, but we could be here a lot longer.
It's a different podcast.
It's a very different podcast. One that I don't feel smart enough to do. But thank you. Yep. So Warm Bodies there from Emma. A little bit of a zombicide romance. Rab, what about you? What have you been reading this summer?
Well, I said about light reads for summer, and actually the book I've picked is a book called Dry, and it's a young adult book about something called the tap out, which is the idea on the west coast of America, all of the water running out, all of the water supply running out, and around how a set of teenagers survive it. So not actually that light at all when you think about it.
No.
I think I picked it because it's a book which has a very sunny setting, because it's in California, and as these kids don't have access to water, you sort of start feeling quite hot and like you need a drink as you're reading it. There's a couple of things that kind of makes it that summery read. It's got not necessarily a romance, but a sort of friendship romance between two characters where they start off not perhaps getting along, and it kind of builds up between them, which is quite nice. But also it's got the sort of gang of young people that you sometimes get in a summer read. It brings me back to almost sort of Stephen King, that sort of idea, where you've got the kind of group surviving. What I really, really like about it is it follows the different characters. So you've got the different characters as narrators as it goes through, and you get to see how their kind of group dynamic works and how they all perceive each other. So different ones of them trust each other more or less, and different ones of them see each other as a bit more of a threat within the friendship group as well. So you've got this kind of teenage runaways feel, but then with this overarching dangerous situation behind it, and the combination of those two is just really good.
So if I'm right in thinking, though, that's written by Neal Schusterman, who also did the Scythe arc trilogy. I think it's called the Scythe arc, or the Arc of the Scythe, which of course has got, again, it's got this sort of like life and death sort of hanging over it. I don't know if anyone's read Scythe here. Really cool thing about basically in the far future, people can't die. So there's a group of people who kill people just to keep the population in check. It's a great trilogy. Again, another YA trilogy. It just seems that Neal Schusterman has that balance of writing sort of teenagers with a perilous, like ominous presence behind them. So I'm very intrigued by that one. But also, yeah, totally get the whole dry Californian heat feeling. Oh, I'm already feeling a little bit warm, to be fair. But yeah, absolutely. For myself, I'm trying to think. I picked a middle grade, and it is called The Malamander by Thomas Taylor. Now, itself is actually set in winter, so for a summer read, it feels a bit weird. Ironic, but it's actually set in this place, which is basically, it's supposed to be like a British seaside town, and so it's called Erie-on-Sea, and weird stuff happens in Erie-on-Sea, and we meet Herbie Lemon, who's the lost and founder of this hotel on this weird town on the British coast somewhere. And the whole fact that it's all grey and gloomy sounded more like the British summertime at the seaside than any other summer read. So for me, there's like weirds going on, and Herbie meets this girl called Violet Palmer. Sorry, Palmer Violet's the sweet she's named after. I just love the fact that all of them have got like sweet-based names. It's fantastic. All the names are puns. I love it. It's very middle grade. But there's a mystery, and there's a monster called the Malamander, which they have to solve. But the fact it's got this grey and grisly British seaside town as the main setting just had me sort of like, how many times have I been stuck at Southend at sea? And it's just been like, let's go there for a summer's day out, and it just rains. So there's a pier.
It's quite the picture, doesn't it?
Yeah, it paints quite a picture. So for me, it was just the fact that British summertime at the seaside, there's lots of memories of, because my grandparents live by Southend, so there was many summers trips to Southend and the pier on Southend, and this one has a pier on it, and I was just like, takes me back, and I'm like, yeah, wet summer days. This is supposed to be like set in the winter, when it mentions at the beginning, like, oh, if you come here in the summer, it looks completely different with all the tourists, and then in the winter, it all becomes grey and grisly. It's really atmospheric, and I think it's a really good book, and fun middle grade. So that is what I've been reading. So we've read quite a few different sort of series of books with different sort of summery vibes, but the summer is not yet over. Woohoo! Still a little bit left to go, which means there's more time to read. So I'm going to do this reverse this time. So Rab, we'll go first to you. What are you looking forward to, or what is on the summer TBR pile?
Well, see, now I've broken my second rule, because my first rule was a light book. And dry as anything but light. And my second rule was a summary setting, and this is a book called The Pearl in the Ice, which is quite clearly a wintry setting. So I think your idea that summary books are ones that break the rules is going to be the one I'm going to stick with. I've done the cardinal sin with The Pearl in the Ice, is that it's a book I'm judging entirely by its cover. I bought it after having a bit of a look at lists of kind of upcoming middle grade books. And it was one that was really recommended, but I know very little about. But it's got a beautiful, almost sort of, it looks sketched or watercolored, the cover, showing a young woman with a dog looking out at whales, perhaps sort of in a wintry sea, which is just beautiful. So, I mean, I think the book by the cover thing is okay, because that's what covers are for. I get the metaphor when it comes to people. With people, don't judge the book by the cover. But when it comes to books, you can actually judge the book by the cover. The text on the backs particularly grabbed me. It's, in terms of a blurb, it's a very simple blurb. Particularly for a middle grade book, it didn't really describe much. It just says, she watched the whales alone, and as she stood on the deck, she fancied she could send some part of herself down into the water and hear, in the echoing cavern of the sea, something astonishing.
Ooh, sounds very intriguing.
I know, I am intrigued, and that's why that's the book I'm looking forward to reading, because Dry was a reread, because I remembered it as particularly summary, whereas this is something completely new, which I'm going into with little knowledge of what to expect, other than it's got a beautiful cover and something nice written on the back. But I think that's a good start.
I mean, yeah, there's an editor somewhere who's done their job very well putting that blurb together. But I mean, we've all bought a book because it's pretty. I have several looking at my TBR going, I kind of bought it because it looks nice. Is it any good? Not read it.
But it's pretty.
It's pretty. So yeah, no, I like that. Maybe actually there's a sort of like the same way you have ice in your drink over the summer. You know, you don't want ice in your drink when it's midwinter, but in the summer, do you want ice in your drink? Yeah, it cools you down. Maybe there's some reverse psychology going on there. So Rab's gone cold for the summer. Emma, are you going to keep us on a chill, or are you going to heat us up?
I'm going to heat things up, but actually not intentionally, because the summer element of this book is not actually why it was on my TBR list. The book is Breathless by Jennifer Niven, and a few of you might know her as she was the author of All the Bright Places, which was recently brought onto Netflix as a film. And I read All the Bright Places. I read one of her other books called Holding Up the Universe, and just loved absolutely both of them. I think she's got a great kind of empathetic writing style, because obviously All the Bright Places deals with depression and mental health, which is very challenging. And I think also very difficult to get right when you're writing about it without being, usually you find people either become too patronizing about it or either don't delve in deep enough to really grasp what it's about. And I think she quite hit the nail on the head with it. And that was one of the reasons why her writing kind of stuck in my head. And I think she announced this book, Breathless, just a few days ago on Twitter. So I was like, right, that's on the TBR. Where's the pre-order? Let's get it. But actually in reading the synopsis, it seems a little bit like it's going to have that summer romance fling. And I'll just read you the final paragraph of the synopsis on the Waterstones website. And it says, "They both know that whatever they have can only last the summer, but maybe one summer is enough." So it does really have that element of a summer fling. And yeah, just all of her writing I've loved so far. So I'm really interested to see what it's going to be like. It says it's 400 pages, so it looks a little bit longer than the previous one she's done. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what that's like.
Yeah, I think if you do find an author who really impacts you, especially if it's their writing, their characterization, whatever it is, I love that idea that you're getting giddy already. It's on pre-order and you're all just like, I need it so much. And yeah, some of those elements of just, love and sort of like, but also I haven't read the other two. I am aware of the Netflix, so I haven't watched it. But it's also, I think that's quite poignant right now, because I think there's a lot of talk around, mental health and depression, especially that most people have been locked down, and it's really sort of come the forefront of things. So I think the writing sounds like it's really at the foreground, and some people might actually just alone. I mean, Breathless sounds like some people might want to get that, but also her backlog as well. You might have just put some people in touch with a new favorite author. So what better for the summer than you get 3 books for the price of 1, which summer sale.
You're all so welcome.
For me, I am going to turn up the heat even more, because my summer pick is basically is very setting focused, and it's one that, to be fair, it's been on my TBR all this summer. I haven't got to it because it's a chunky boy, and that is Traitor to the Throne by Alwyn Hamilton. It's the second book in this series. I loved Rebel in the Sands, and Emma is smiling because it was Emma who actually was just like, hey, you got to check this out. When I was first like, you know what, I've just read this book, it's YA, I really liked it and I want to try some more, she like threw Rebel in the Sands at me and I consumed it. But that was like nice, like 300, 350 page sort of book. This is a little bit of a big boy. This is like, it's getting close to 600 pages. So for Traitor to the Throne or Rebel in the Sands, the series itself is about a girl called Armani who is in this Nowhereville desert town, but she is like a badass like pistol shooter. It's got sort of like Middle Eastern vibes to it, with like genies, and there's like an evil regime that's sort of oppressing everyone. There's a war in the background. There's lots of like fantasy and Arabian Night elements sort of like mashing together. You've also got like the rootin' tootin' pistol shooting of sort of Wild West, which I love as well. I loved the first book, and so I know I have to read this, because reading the back, I'm not going to go into it too much because it's the second book, so I don't want to break it. But if you do want a sort of like a fun series to get your teeth into, I should probably say Rebel in the Sands, but that's one I've read. I could probably reread it. Probably will reread it. Oh, but then that's putting off this book again if I reread that. You see the problems? This is Bookish Problems 101. But yeah, so for me, I need to get around to keeping on, because there's a third book in this as well, which we also have to get to, which is also a chunky boy. So I got a couple of big books in my my bookish TBR future, but that is Traitor to the Throne, which is the second book in the Rebel in the Sands series by Alwyn Hamilton. If you want an Arabian-esque fantasy world with gunslingers and genies, that's the one to go for. Okay, so that is going to wrap up our show. Thank you so much, everyone who's listening right now. I hope you really like this new format. I loved it. Thank you so much for being on the show today, guys, because it's so much more fun to talk to other people about books than just talk to myself and a microphone. Definitely more fun. Also less weird, because it feels less like talking to myself, which, yeah, I do enough of that already, so it's fine. But big thank you to you, Emma, for coming on. Thank you so much.
No, thanks for having me. It was really good fun, and I've definitely got some new books to add to my TBR list if there's any more space on my bookshelf. So I might be in the market for another bookshelf. But if you ever fancy listening to me rant about books or anything nonsensical, then you can catch me on Twitter at EmmaKeen10, and let's talk books. Why not?
Absolutely. And we'll take your suggestions from today. They'll be in the footnotes for the show. So Emma's suggestions will be up. I think we'll add all, even your triple header, we'll add that in there. So we'll have all Emma's books. And Rab, again, congratulations on the awesome bookish news. And thank you so much for being on today's show.
Thank you for having me. Anyone who wants to find out a little bit more about the Landfill Mountains, which is sort of a summer read in itself, I'd hope, because it's got young characters surviving in baking heat by collecting waste from giant mountains of landfill. You can find out a little bit more about me and what I write on Rabtales, RABTALES, and that's on Twitter or on Instagram.
Fantastic. And like we said, we will put links to everyone's social media in the show notes as well as their bookish suggestions. I have been your host, Marcus. You find me at author_MJ Henson. And until next time, I just want to say thank you so much for listening. Stay safe and keep on reading.